When I first met her, it felt like one of those rare moments where everything just fits. We were introduced through mutual friends at a quiet dinner party. Nothing fancy, just good conversation, soft music, and her smile that somehow made the room feel warmer. She was smart, kind, and had this calming energy that made me want to lean in and listen. We bonded over books, late-night walks, and our shared love for old indie films. I wasn't looking for love when we met, but love found me, quietly and completely. Over time, we built something that felt stable, comforting, even a little magical. We laughed easily, shared dreams about the future, and slowly started weaving our lives together. I trusted her completely, and maybe that's what makes the rest of this story harder to tell. Because when you trust someone that deeply, you don't prepare for the moments that might shake that trust. You assume the road ahead is solid. You believe that true love means honesty, clarity, and care. And in the beginning, that's what I thought we had. This story isn't about catching someone in a dramatic lie or uncovering some scandalous secret. It's about the slow realization that someone you love might still be emotionally tethered to someone from their past, and how that realization can slowly change everything. Before I tell you the rest, I just want you to remember how good things were at the start, because that's what made the questions that came later so hard to ask. It started with a name I hadn't heard before. We were sitting on the couch one evening, just scrolling through our phones like we usually do. She got a message, smiled softly, and typed something quickly. I didn't think much of it until she mentioned casually, "Oh, it's just Ela. We used to talk back in the day." Eli. The name didn't mean anything to me, at least not then. But something about her tone felt different, familiar, maybe. It wasn't defensive, but it wasn't entirely open either. You know that feeling when your gut quietly nudges you, whispering, "There's more here?" That's what I felt. So I asked gently, "Used to talk? Like friends?" She hesitated for just a second before saying, "Well, we dated a long time ago, but we've always stayed friends." That moment hung in the air. I nodded, trying not to overthink. But inside, a little seed of doubt was planted. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing little things. Eli's name popped up more often. A message here, a call there, never anything explicitly secretive, but just frequent, comfortable, sometimes more than I talked to her in a day. She swore it was nothing, that they were just catching up, that he was someone from her past but didn't mean anything now. But here's the thing, I wasn't sure anymore. Not because she was hiding him, but because she wasn't. It was the openness with which she stayed, connected, that made me question. If he really meant nothing, why did it feel like he still meant something? And for the first time in our relationship, I began to wonder, was I being insecure? Or was I finally seeing something I was meant to notice? I didn't want to come off as controlling. That was the last thing I wanted to be. But I also couldn't ignore the growing discomfort in my chest every time Eli's name lit up her screen. It wasn't about jealousy, it was about clarity. So one night I asked her if we could talk. Really talk. I told her, "Hey, I know this might sound silly, but I've been feeling a little off about your conversations with Eli. It's not that I don't trust you, it's just something doesn't sit right with me." She looked at me, surprised, then softly said, "I get it, but you have nothing to worry about. He's just someone I used to know. We catch up sometimes. It's innocent." And that believed her I wanted to, but her words and her actions didn't always line up. She would tell me she barely spoke to him anymore, but I'd catch her laughing at her phone late at night. She'd say their connection was in the past, yet still defend it fiercely if I questioned it. It was confusing. I began asking myself, was I being unreasonable? Or were her reassurances meant to calm me down, not tell me the full truth? I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for peace, but instead, I was waking up each day with a little more doubt and a little less trust. And that's what hurt the most, not the messages or the history, but the fact that I couldn't tell where I stood anymore. And somewhere deep down, I began to wonder, if the roles were reversed, would she be okay with me texting someone I once loved? It all came to a head one Friday evening. We were supposed to go out for dinner, just the two of us, a night to reconnect, to be present. But as I got ready, I noticed she was unusually quiet, her eyes glued to her phone. I didn't want to be suspicious, but I asked anyway, gently, "Is everything okay?" She hesitated, then said, "It's just Eli. He's going through something and needed to talk." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, holding my jacket, my plans for a peaceful night crumbling quietly inside me. Finally, I asked, "Do you realize how often that name comes up? How often your attention shifts away when it's supposed to be our time?" She looked defensive. He, as just a friend. I can't ignore someone in need. And that's when I broke. Not in anger, but in sadness. I sat down and told her, I've never asked you to cut people out of your life lightly. I've tried to be understanding, even when it hurt, but it's reached a point where I don't feel prioritized. I feel like there's always someone else in the room, even when we're alone. She didn't respond right away. The silence between us was louder than any fight. I didn't want ultimatums. I didn't want control. I wanted honesty and a relationship where both people felt equally valued. And in that moment, I realized something important. Boundaries aren't about restrictions. They're about respect. And I wasn't sure I felt respected anymore. She didn't say anything that night, just sat there, silent, her eyes filled with something. Between guilt and confusion, and I didn't press. I went to bed alone that night, with my heart heavier than it had been in a long time. The next morning, she tried to explain. She said Eli was like a piece of her past she never fully let go of. Not because she still loved him romantically, but because he was around during some of her hardest times. Her words were careful, emotional, but part of me still ached to understand why. If she valued our relationship, she couldn't see how this was slowly hurting it. She told me she felt torn, like cutting him off would feel like cutting off a part of her history. I told her I wasn't asking her to erase the past. I was asking her to be present with me in the future. We spent the next few days in this strange emotional limbo. Some moments felt normal, like nothing had changed. Others were thick with tension. We danced around the conversation. Until one evening, she finally said, I told Eli we needed space. She looked at me not for praise, but for reassurance. Like she needed to know it was enough, and I appreciated that. But I also realized that healing from something like this doesn't happen instantly. It takes time to rebuild trust, to feel like the only two people in a relationship are the ones actually in it. That moment felt like a step forward. A painful one, but a step. Looking back, that conversation changed everything, not just between us, but inside me too. I always thought relationships were about love, loyalty, shared dreams, and they are. But they're also about boundaries, respect, feeling safe with someone, even when the world outside feels uncertain. After she told Eli they needed space, I saw a shift in her, not just in how she acted, but how she showed up in our relationship. She started asking more questions, listening more, checking in with me emotionally in ways she hadn't before, and I started doing the same. It wasn't about control, it was about clarity, about both of us learning to communicate not just our needs, but our fears, our insecurities, the things we're sometimes too afraid to say out loud. I realized that my feelings weren't unreasonable. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being too much. I was simply someone trying to protect something I cared about deeply. And she realized that sometimes, holding on to the past even gently, can hold us back from fully being present in the now. It wasn't a perfect process. There were still tough conversations. Doubt would creep in, but something shifted in our foundation. For the first time in a long time, we weren't just going through the motions, we were growing together. And in that growth, we found a kind of peace, not because the issue disappeared, but because we chose each other consciously, intentionally. That was the turning point. That's when healing began to feel real. If you'd asked me at the beginning of this, I would have said I just wanted her to stop talking to him. That's all. But now I understand what I really needed. I needed to feel like I mattered enough that she'd protect our relationship the way I did. That she'd draw lines, not because I told her to, but because we mattered more than a shared history with someone else. When you love someone, it's not about ownership. It's about trust, about choosing each other again and again, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it means letting go of something that once felt harmless. There's still a part of me that wonders what would have happened if she'd said no. If she'd chosen to keep Eli in her life no matter what. I'm not sure I would have stayed. And that's hard to admit. But the truth is, we all carry past versions of ourselves. People we used to love. Stories that shaped us. The challenge comes when we're asked to fully show up for the story. We're now this one together. And she did. She chose us. Not because I forced her to, but because we talked. We listened. We cried a little too. I won't pretend this was easy, or that everyone should make the same decision I did. But for me, it was about protecting my peace, my heart, and I don't regret that. So, AITA for asking her to let go of someone from her past? I don't know. Maybe you'll tell me. But I do know this. Sometimes asking for what you need isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the most honest, loving thing you can do. What would you have done in my place?